Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by again. This is my weekly live stream. For those who are new to the channel, I have these streams every Wednesday night at around 8 p.m., usually going from anywhere from 10 to 11. Maybe tonight will be a little bit shorter, but we'll kind of play it by ear. Sitting next to me is my wife, Brianna. When she's able, she co-hosts the show. She'll probably be around for the first hour or so tonight, before having to go to bed because she has to get up and work like a normal person. And besides that, we're happy to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. I won't do a super long recap tonight because you guys have likely already heard the stories about Super Tuesday. For those who don't know, I did a Super Tuesday event on Mike Figueredo's channel, The Humanist Report. He was very gracious to have me on, and I was very happy to fill in for him while he was dealing with some personal issues. So you can go check that out for my general take, and you can, of course, check out a lot of the other great left-wing creators like David Dole and Michael Brooks and the Young Turks and all of those folks. But in general, I think we can all agree that it was a less than ideal night for Bernie Sanders, right? At the end of the day, Bernie Sanders was expected to do better. He was expected to win many of the states, maybe not all of them. And the states that he lost, he was expected to be closer in. Some of the states like Minnesota and Massachusetts and even Maine, he was probably expected to win. But a few things happened. I think, one, the media took a more or less respected result in South Carolina and played it up as the biggest upset since Thermopylae. You know what I mean? They played it up as the biggest thing in a century or more, where like Joe Biden, the underdog, won the state that he was always expected to win. And that combined with the Clyburn endorsement, and that combined with the Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke endorsements, all within 24 hours, maybe 36 hours of one. I know they all endorsed on the same night, but the endorsements were announced all within like a day and a bit. Really set the tone and united the center-right in a way that we weren't quite expecting. And then even this morning, you see Michael Bloomberg jumping in with Joe Biden. And because Warren didn't do the same for Bernie, it left this imbalance. And Bernie Sanders likely doesn't have a fantastic night if Warren drops out, but he likely wins. Not as much as he would maybe need to have a narrative victory, but he probably wins he probably wins Massachusetts. He has a shot at winning Minnesota. He does much better in California. He likely wins Texas, and on and on and on and on. And so it was not a great night. And of course, the media, as it is, are trying to spin this race as over, that Bernie Sanders is done, that he needs to drop out, endorse Biden, and unite behind the guy that can defeat Donald Trump. And that's where we are. But we need to have some perspective, because right now, if I look, I can pull it up right here, because the numbers are always updating. But if you look up NPR right now, NPR Super Tuesday, I go there. If you look, right as we talk, the delegate totals in the contest right now are Biden 566 and Bernie 501. That's only a 65 delegate spread between first and second, and no one else is even close to 100. So it's a two-horse race, and the gap is way smaller than the Bernie Clinton gap after Super Tuesday 2016. You combine that with the fact that national polling has kind of put Joe Biden back in first, but not by a significant amount. And some of the national polls I've seen have had Bloomberg lower than Warren. And so the YouGov national poll that came out actually just today had Bernie 4 points back of Biden, but Warren 8 points ahead of Bloomberg. And so if Warren does drop out and does endorse Bernie, again, which isn't a guarantee either of those things, and she brings most of her support to Bernie and most of Bloomberg's support goes to Biden, then that probably puts you in a dead heat, maybe a slight advantage for Bernie on the national picture. So this isn't over, and that's one thing I really want to stress. Biden is a weaker candidate than Clinton. He is a gaffe machine. He doesn't have the real, organizational strength. He's not strong himself. The man mixed up his wife for his sister. The man cannot recite the Declaration of Independence. The man did not know about the office he was running for a few nights ago. He's still beatable. And that's just one thing I really want to hammer home. In terms of Warren needs to drop out. I don't like people using the snake emoji. I don't like people using gendered slurs against Elizabeth Warren. I don't like to see that on my own timelines or anything like that. I don't like that. It's disrespectful. But we have to, be honest with ourselves. Elizabeth Warren, should have dropped out after Nevada. Maybe even after New Hampshire. That's when she should have dropped out. Because, she had no path to victory. After New Hampshire, Warren was basically in a position that she couldn't win. Because if you look at it, Warren was, had a decent Iowa. Nothing great, but nothing awful. And New Hampshire was supposed to be a great state for her. Borders Massachusetts, very, very white, which is good for Warren, and very, very highly educated, which is especially good for Warren. Warren does very well among highly educated people. It makes sense. She's like a Harvard law professor, or she was. And she failed in that state miserably. And she should have been done at that point, and she should have endorsed Bernie. And it's unfortunate she didn't. If Warren stays in, and I know she's basically preparing to resign or to suspend her campaign. That's what it looks like. But if she stays in and Bernie drops out, when Bloomberg dropped out and endorsed Biden, it's game over, guys. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but Bernie's not winning unless Warren drops out and probably either endorses him or at the very least stays neutral. If she endorses Biden, we're likely in trouble as well. That's where we're at with that. Other things happening, the Bloomberg dropping out thing is, of course, very interesting. Man spent $500 million to win American Samoa. And it's funny, right? It's funny that Bloomberg did that. It's funny that Bloomberg wasted, hundreds of millions of dollars to basically get laughed at on international TV for 3 months. But then you think about it another way, and there were some reports today saying that if Bernie Sanders doesn't win, or even Warren, but Warren's not going to be president. If Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren didn't win, Bloomberg saves literally billions of dollars. Because Bernie's wealth tax, and Warren's wealth tax, to be fair, hits multi-billionaires especially hard. Now, it's still nothing to him. But the wealth tax would likely cost him about $5 billion a year. Right? For him, that's nothing. It's like 10% of his wealth. Less, probably. But he saved money on this campaign. Scary as it is. Finally, just from Canada, some quick news here. We are dealing with we're continuing to deal with the pipeline crisis issue here, but there does appear to be some movement towards reconciliation on this particular issue. It's not done yet. By no means is it done yet, but the sides are talking, and I'm hopeful that we can reach a result that respects fundamentally the rights and title of Indigenous nations. That's something that I hope we do get to see, because what we've seen from Canada, and again, including from my own political party, has been a disrespect for Indigenous people and their rights. And not all parties are equal, of course, but all parties are culpable for what's been happening in Ontario at Tyendinaga and in British Columbia and the Wetsuweten territory. And I think we have to face that fact. And on another note, we got some new popularity numbers. Andrew Scheer and Justin Trudeau are super unpopular. We're talking minus 30 favorabilities. That's like Trump level unpopular. Trump's probably more popular right now than Justin Trudeau and Andrew Scheer, scary as that is. Jagmeet Singh's popular. Jagmeet Singh's favorability is +9. Blanchette is popular. He only gets pulled in Quebec. because he only runs in Quebec, but he's popular. But our two main parties are led by men that the average majority, the average Canadian, just can't stand. So I think that's kind of funny, I would think. And finally, the NDP's up in the polls. I think it's likely a mixture of Trudeau's general crumminess, but it's also probably due to the fact that Jagmeet is well liked by Canadians, and that rubs off on the party. And also, the NDP has been proposing dental care, pharmacare, things like that in Parliament. And, these are things the Liberals have pretended to support. And when they're not enacting them, I think that's showing some NDP Liberal swing voters that maybe they're better off with the NDP. So we could take questions, comments, concerns about these things and any other thing. Likely I expect Super Tuesday is going to be the focus, how Bernie can win going forward, all of those sorts of things. But we have flexibility. I know we got a super chat. Yeah.
Did we have a super chat?
Yeah.
Okay. Samantha Sider. We have a super chat from Samantha Sider. So thank you very much. And she says, I will pay big money to Warren's primary opponent.
A lot of people are saying that Warren should be primaried. And I don't necessarily disagree. But the caveat has to be that she gets primaried by somebody better. And the real sad reality of the Senate is that if you look at those 100 senators, right? And leave out all the GOP senators, because, let's be real. If you look at the 48, 47, however many Democratic senators there are, who's better than Warren for progressives? Markey, maybe, from maybe Markey? Who's more progressive than Warren? Not on isolated issues, but overall. And that's not me necessarily defending Warren, but it's to say that, if you primary her, you better hope that you can isolate that primary with a left-on-left challenge. Because otherwise, you don't want a situation where she gets primaried by a, neoliberal Democrat, and, she gets primaried by a Bernie Sanders-type Democrat, and then they split the vote, and you get somebody even worse than Warren. So I think we have to be tactical there. If Warren endorses Bernie, I'm not saying all of this goes away, but if she endorses Bernie, drops out, endorses him, I do think that there's a path back for her to respectability among progressives. Hard feelings might exist for years, but I don't know if Warren's going to be the primary target. And it's also strategy. How many crappy Democrats are there out there that need to be primaried first before Warren? And I think, that's another consideration. Okay.
Brandon Tozo says, how important is Michigan next week?
Brandon, very important.
Also, he says I should have my own show.
Brianna probably should have her own show. That would be great. Brianna should have her own show.
Maybe you could let me talk on this one.
Yeah,
Okay, how important is Michigan?
Yeah, Michigan's very important. So next week, guys, we have another. See, at the beginning, you have all these 1 day elections. You had Iowa on 1 day, New Hampshire on 1 day, Nevada on 1 day, South Carolina on 1 day. And because, of course, the media doesn't want Bernie to win, none of those mattered except for South Carolina, right? And then you had Super Tuesday. Next week, you have 6 primaries. I believe it's Idaho, North Dakota, Washington, Michigan, Missouri, and I believe Alabama or one of the other southern states. And so basically, Mississippi, I think. So you can throw Mississippi. Bernie's got no shot at Mississippi, I don't think, barring a major Biden gaffe. Bernie is likely going to do very well in Washington. That's a good Bernie state, so you can sort of throw that one to Bernie. The question is going to be, can he do decently in Missouri, which is sort of like a Midwestern state that Bernie could be strong in, and that Biden's really been underwhelming in some parts of the Midwest. That's a big one. But the crucial test is Michigan. Michigan is a large state. It's not one of the biggest, but it's a larger state. It's got a lot of delegates. It's a state that represents a whole bunch of different factors. It's going to be a swing state. It's going to be one of those states that the Democrats need to win. And so Bernie Sanders picking it up could put him in a position to not only gain some momentum on Biden, but to bolster the narratives that he can win the swing states. It's crucial. It's tricky because the way the schedule works is there's not another debate until that primary day. I believe it's next week, and you get those 6 primaries, and then a few days after that, you have the next, and I believe it's the final debate. At least it's the final one scheduled. And I think those are crucial moments. But if Bernie has a really bad night, he might just lose then and there. And I think that's something we have to be concerned about.
Okay, so you have something from a member.
Oh yeah, so we have a new member. So Justin Frederick has become a member of the channel.
Okay.
So Brianna is co-hosting, I think, for the first time since we unlocked memberships for the channel. So basically, what a member does is they give support on a monthly basis. There's various tiers, and in exchange for that, I give them rewards like Patreon and stuff, and they get a little badge, and you can see see the badges.
I see it. Okay.
Yeah. And so, thank you so much, Justin, for your longtime viewership of the channel and for your support in becoming a member. I really appreciate it.
That's cool. Okay, we have a super chat from Karen Sita, and she says, "Yay, welcome back on Livestream, Brianna," which is cool. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
Then we have...
Brianna loves being here. Like I noted last week, when we first started doing these, Brianna was on parental leave. Of course, parental leave's a lot of work, but Brianna had more flexibility. Now that she's back at work, like her job, she's not always available Wednesday evenings, so she'll join us whenever she can for how long she can.
Yeah. And then we have another super chat from Wendy Melly that says, "Good job on the Humanist Report, and my condolences go to Mike and his family."
Yeah, thank you so much. And I noticed when we were about to start, some people also thanked me for that. Yeah, for those who don't know, the Humanist Report is a large progressive YouTube channel, very similar to mine in terms of, ideological leanings, pro Bernie Sanders. And Mike's always been willing to help me and share my work around. And he reached out to me last night saying, my father passed away. I don't think I'm in the position to make a video. Would you help me out? And I was happy to do so. And I was also very honored to have a space on his channel where he has, many more viewers than I do. So it was a great honor and a great responsibility. And for those who watch both channels, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you're one of my viewers that hasn't watched Mike's channel, go to the Humanist Report. If you just type that into your search bar, I'm sure it'll come up.
Okay. We have another question from Rosemana Jordan, and they say, do you guys think Bernie Sanders should challenge Joe Biden to a one-on-one debate?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if he has to challenge him to a one-on-one debate, because the way it's shaping up is it might just happen, right?
I don't think he would accept.
Yeah, and Brianna's 100% right. Biden wouldn't accept, one, because he's terrified, and what he would say is, we have a process, let's follow the process. And I think that would likely, Bernie might look bad if he tried to do that outside the realm of the debate structure. The only way is maybe if there's no debate scheduled and it's still very close between him and Biden, there might be calls for more debates. Because, people might still need more decision time, and one-on-one debates are a better simulation of what a presidential election debate is going to be like, because they're almost always just 1v1, right? So, if you look at the debate schedule, again, there's 6 more primaries before the next debate. And so the only people left in the race right now are Bernie, Biden, Warren, and Gabbard. Now, under the current rules, Gabbard is qualified for the next debate, unless I'm mistaken. The way it used to be is you needed to raise so much money, and you needed to have so many donors, and you needed to be polling well, either in upcoming states or in the national picture, and in certain polls that were deemed reputable, because they were qualifying polls. And if you didn't meet the enough thresholds, you didn't get invited to the debate, which is what happened to Cory Booker and Julian Castro later last year. And it was one of the reasons they dropped out as early as they did, I assume. They probably would have stuck it out a little bit longer if they could stay in the debates. But what happened when Michael Bloomberg came in was they changed the rules a little bit. And they made it so that it was based off polling without having to consider donors. And it was also based off of, how do I put it? It was also based off the fact that if you were doing well with delegates, you could go in. And the rule was, if you were polling well nationally, or polling well in an upcoming state, or you had a single delegate, then you qualified for the debates. And so at least hypothetically, Gabbard got one delegate last night. She got one from American Samoa because she was viable. She finished in second. She got one delegate there. She should be eligible for the debates. But they might change the rules again. Whether that's fair or not, we can have a debate. But if Warren's dropping out, and I do think that if she's not out by the next round of primaries, she'll be out right after. I do think she's going to drop out in the next day or two. Then it's going to be Biden versus Bernie, and we're going to get that one-on-one debate. And I do think that's a great opportunity for Bernie Sanders, because one, as the no longer front runner, Biden's now the front runner. It'll give Bernie a chance to attack him. And Hillary Clinton, as much as I was not a fan, is much more competent and resilient than Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders has a real chance to come back and win this primary. I fundamentally believe that.
Okay, question from Sin Historia. What happens to delegates who went to PDB at all? Just wasted? Question mark.
Can you read that again? Sorry.
What happens to delegates who went to PDB at all? Just wasted.
I was like, I was like PDB, and I was like, what acronym is that?
PDB.
Yeah. So okay, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if they have to technically vote with the person that they were voted for in the first round. I don't know if they can just be handed off before the first round, because technically at the convention they voted for Pete Buttigieg or Amy Klobuchar or Michael Bloomberg, or Liz Warren's probably dropping out, or Liz Warren, and all of those people have some delegates, a few or a couple dozen or whatever. And so I think in the first round, they're locked to the person they voted with, because they don't just represent the candidate, they represent the will of the voters in those early states. But what happens after round 2 is that the superdelegates can come in, but even leaving those superdelegates aside, all those candidates will be freed up to go to other people. And likely, most of them at least, will follow the advice of the person that they were sent for. So Pete's delegates will go to Joe Biden in round 2. But that won't happen unless neither candidate reaches a majority. So it's something to consider that, like, if it does go to a second round, you have to sort of add Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar and Michael Bloomberg's delegates, at least tentatively, to Biden's total. Narrative-wise, if Bernie ends up beating Biden and he has to take everyone else's delegates, it'll look bad, but it'll be within the realm of the rules.
Okay, Dan Cordovan asks, what are the odds that Elizabeth Warren drops out?
I mean, I don't know about the odds, right? I mean, I think she's likely done. So, like, the timeline was Warren was staying in until the convention a few days ago. After South Carolina, everyone was like, Liz, what the heck are you doing? Like, you bombed South Carolina.
Who do you think she'll endorse? Also, follow-up question.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So, like, you did so bad in South Carolina. You did so bad in so many states. Like, you didn't have a second place finish. You didn't finish second anywhere. And this was before Super Tuesday, where she didn't even finish second in her home state. Like, stop sort of like wasting everyone's time. And she was like, no, I'm going to go to the convention. And her hope was, I'm going to get enough votes that neither Bernie nor Biden can get a majority. And I'm going to become the consensus pick by the convention who wants neither Biden nor Bernie. And so the Bernie people can tolerate me. The Biden people can tolerate me. I'll be the nominee. It's never going to happen. But that was her conceit. And
Oh, she's like being the Andrew Scheer of Canada.
Kind of, except with way less legitimacy because our system is built around that multi-ballot process. Theirs really isn't. But like, yeah, you're right. She was trying to be the Andrew Scheer, and look, Mr. negative 36% favorability right now. So, you know what I mean? It's not very good. So, she basically was like, I'm staying in. And then Super Tuesday happened, and she had an awful night. And last night, at least, she was like, I'm going to the next states. She sent out a fundraising email. And then this morning, we found out that Michael Bloomberg was dropping out. And not only was he dropping out, he was endorsing Biden. And so then we started to get word, like officially from the Warren campaign, that she's taking some time to reassess things. They're admitting now that they basically got like, you know, a very disappointing result. They weren't viable in many states, including big ones like California. And I think she's going to drop out. I think she's going to be out within the next 48 hours. In terms of endorsing, I don't know. I wouldn't give odds, like numbers, but I would say the likelihood of her, if she endorses, I do think she'll endorse Bernie over Biden. She knows it would be absolutely devastating to her entire image to endorse Biden. Maybe she feels that if she has to make a choice, she doesn't want to make a choice, she can endorse no one. Maybe she gets away with that. But if she endorses Biden, people will destroy her, and not without reason, right? And I think like that's a major factor. So I have a hope that she's going to drop out soon in the next couple days, well before the vote of the next states, and she'll endorse Bernie. But I'm not confident on that guess. I'm more confident about her dropping out, though. I think she's done. One thing to note, guys, is Warren's fundraising has picked up relative to where it was, a few weeks ago, but it's not where it needs to be if you're actually competing this late in the game. And CNN was reporting that the super PAC that Warren started taking money from is basically not going to fund her election on January 10th, the next round of elections, which indicates to me that super PAC, which basically only existed to keep her in the race to hurt Bernie, has accomplished its mission and now is abandoning Warren. And if that PAC isn't there, I wonder if she has the resources to run another campaign. Again, this is 6 states again. This isn't a one-state thing. It's 6 states, Washington and I think Mississippi. It's national in scope.
Okay, so timestamp on this next question is 8:07, so I don't know if it's changed yet. But,
okay.
Joseph Mangano says, the New York Times hasn't called California for Bernie. Is there something I'm missing?
I mean, if I look at NPR...
Again, that was 8:07. So
yeah.
I'm not sure.
I mean, it's thinking of moving slow. If I look at NPR, they have called California for Bernie. And I believe the Associated Press has as well. One of the concerns, I think, why some sources delayed calling for Bernie in the later states was last night what happened. And this was a sign that it really was a good night for Joe Biden. Like, we have to be honest. Like, I'm a biased as all heck channel. But, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Oh.
Brianna didn't know we were a biased channel.
Didn't get it.
Until, yeah.
Yeah, no idea.
But like, credit where credit's due, Bernie Sanders did far better with advanced voters and or people that went to the polling station but said they had already decided. And Biden did extremely well in the states with limited amounts of advanced voting and did well amongst those people that said, I made a decision in the last 2 or 3 days. So Biden had the momentum. And so what happened in Texas last night was that Bernie Sanders did very well at first, but as more and more of the actual day, like the day on voting was counting, Joe Biden slowly reeled him in. And that's how Biden ended up winning Texas by a couple points, even though Bernie was leading by 6 or 7. There's a concern that the same thing's happening in California, but Bernie's original lead in California was much larger. And another factor is that there's like 90% of the vote counted according to NPR. Now, this might not be the most up to date, and Bernie has a almost a 9-point lead. And so that's not changing. Like the Biden might narrow it, but that the Bernie's going to win California.
Common sense isn't always correct says Washington Post had an article that Warren and Bernie teams will have a conference call tomorrow. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. And I think that's a good sign for them getting an endorsement. I mean, maybe she's also talking to Biden for all we know. Maybe she's like exploring all her options. Although I hope that she's, just to be polite to Joe Biden, she's taking his call. I would really, I hope she doesn't endorse Joe Biden. Maybe she can endorse him, of course, when he's the nominee. Bernie Sanders will probably endorse Joe Biden when he's the nominee. It's the way this sort of thing works. Whether you like it or not, that's how it's going to work. But Bernie today said at his press conference that he had spoken, himself had spoken with Warren, and that he respects Warren taking the time to make her decision. She's more than earned the time and space to overview her campaign, which I think is a good sign that Bernie is being very cordial to Liz Warren on this particular matter, and that there's a potential for a rapprochement between the two. I think, honestly, we've been on this channel, we've had a bit of a roller coaster with Warren, and I don't think any of it is unwarranted. When I praised Warren last year, she was running a far better campaign, and the polls showed it. When Warren was running as who Warren could be, which was not as left-wing as Bernie Sanders, but a genuine, left-leaning person in the American context, she was well ahead in second, and she was, for a brief little bit, ahead of Joe Biden. Bernie never even got close to Biden until a few weeks ago. So Warren, for a long time, was the only one that even gave Biden a run for his money throughout all of 2019. But then what happened is she started to moderate, quote unquote, on Medicare for all. She started to hire advisors from the old Clinton team and from the Kamala Harris's team when she dropped out. And all of these sorts of moves, she, took the PAC money. She lied about Bernie Sanders, and slowly she started to decline. And I think that, a lot of it is her fault. A lot of it is her fault. And then she started to attack Bernie, and now she's not stepping out, even though she knows it's the only way to get her policies enacted, is to get Bernie Sanders as president. So, I've begun from very supportive of Warren as a clear progressive to very critical of Warren as somebody who's sort of betrayed her closest friend in the Senate. But, maybe she can have a redemption story. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Okay, switching to Canadian news.
Yeah, for sure.
Jake Sisko says, who should lead the Ontario NDP? Is Del Luca going to ruin the Ontario Liberals?
The person who should lead the Ontario NDP is Andrea Horwath, the current leader of the Ontario NDP, at least until the next election, and then we'll reevaluate as the party does. If you're looking for, who do I think could be a potential successor, maybe after Premier Horwath serves a term or two, then Merritt Stiles could be an option. She's young. She's a new MPP, but she was the former president of the federal party, so she's got deep roots in the NDP. She is good to hear. She's a big Bernie Sanders fan. That's always nice to know. Which side is she on? She's also been of course, the teachers themselves have been the real leaders, but beyond that, she's been one of the leaders in opposing Doug Ford and Stephen Lecce's attacks on public education and on students and on teachers and on educational support workers and all of that. And I think that would be a potential option. Of course, if Joel Hardin decided to run, I think that would be fantastic. He might find it difficult to win. I don't know if the party establishment would want Joel Hardin, but he would likely get a lot of the support from young people, from the party left wing, from the activist crowd. It could be a big run. You might also see people like Catherine Fife run. But right now, Andrea Horwath is the leader. And again, one of the things I was telling people was that when you were seeing the polls for the Ontario Liberals, they were high in the polls because Ontarians could imagine their ideal Liberal leader in their mind. For Ontarians that were right of center, they could think of a basically conservative liberal leader that would be like Doug Ford, but way more respectable and put together and polished. And a lot of NDP liberal switchers could imagine like a somebody even more progressive than Kathleen Wynne, basically an NDPer, but like they have the eye of an ear of the business community. And that's why when the Ontario Liberals were polling so high, they were doing it because they didn't actually have to make a decision. As early as last spring and summer, when the Ontario Liberals were polled, and you actually stuck a name under the leader list, they tanked. Whether it was Coteau or Mitzi Hunter, and especially Del Duca, they tanked. The only exception was John Tory, who actually made their numbers rise into the 40s, the low 40s, high 30s, low 40s. And so this is not surprising. Any leader they pick will lower their numbers, 100%, because you're going to alienate people. You pick somebody perceived as left-wing, the loose Doug Ford voters will go back to Doug Ford. You pick Del Duca, the liberal voters who voted NDP last time, but would be open to voting liberal, are not going to vote for Del Duca, at least not a lot of them. And so right now, I think if Del Duca's the leader, and I do think he's going to end up being the leader, I don't know if that's the right move, but he does have a big lead in the delegates that will be voting, then Andrea Horwath is going to have an excellent chance of being the next premier. Andrea's not perfect. She ran a woeful 2014 campaign, but she ran a great 2018 campaign in a lot of ways. There were some issues, but she ran a good campaign. The issue is going to be, fundamentally, who do you replace her with before the election? And I don't know if you replace a leader that's as popular as she is. And people will say to me, like, they'll say, like, those numbers don't mean anything because she's still losing, but I don't know. I don't know if there's anyone to replace her right now. The person to replace Andrea, as we all know, was supposed to be Jagmeet.
It was Jagmeet, yeah.
Right? And Jagmeet's federal leader now. There's lots of people that will be able to replace her in due course, but she's running in the next election.
Okay. Another one from Jake Sisko. Why is there such casual racism against Aboriginal people in Canada? It's a big question there.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's not even casual, as we've been seeing. The way the Canadian state has acted, the way, some of the oil and gas, boosters have acted, the way some of our media talks about Indigenous people, it is more than casual. It is sometimes very virulent racism against Indigenous people. So, there's that, right? Not to dispute your point, but, a lot of this is more than casual. But, I mean, I think a lot of it is based on the fact that, we live a very segregated, existence in Canada. Indigenous people that live on reserve are often isolated from non-Indigenous Canadians, and often from other Indigenous peoples, too. Reserves, especially when they're in the far north or in remote communities, are very isolated, but not even exclusively those ones. And so when you don't have, a lot of sustained contact, it allows stereotypes to flourish a little bit more effectively because you don't have those anecdotal experiences. And even in cities like Winnipeg and Edmonton and a lot of Thunder Bay, where there are a lot of Indigenous people that live urban lives, even in those communities, there's a lot of segregation. And it just happens in the United States as well, where we assume the South is the land of segregation because of the history. But cities like New York and Chicago are way more segregated than the cities in the South. And they're segregated through a hybrid of income and class and race and education that basically create these sort of these pillars where people don't really connect to one another between them. And that's where a lot of these stereotypes come from. And a lot of these are just kind of passed down. Most people know not to use certain slurs. Most people know not to, openly say they feel all Indigenous people are criminals or what have you. But a lot of people just assume, for instance, that, Indigenous people all get free university educations, or Indigenous people get this or that, or, Indigenous people get jobs more because of their indigeneity or what have you, or perceived indigeneity. And a lot of these things aren't true. In some cases, they're precisely false, but the perpetuation is allowed to kind of continue. And I think like that's a major factor, is the lack of cultural communication and vision between settler and indigenous cultures. And it's very interesting because, I mean, indigenous people are 5% of the Canadian population, which is smaller than, say, the African American population, but they have the additional like challenge of many indigenous people in the north, for instance, just being so far from the majority of settler Canadians. Most settler Canadians will never visit the territories. I haven't. Brianna's only gone. Have you gone to the territories? No, Brianna's sister lives in the Northwest Territories right now, and she's also in Yukon, I think, sometimes too. She kind of travels between the two, but we've never been up there, and so most Canadians haven't either. And that's where stereotypes flourish in that context.
Okay. Super chat from Joseph Mangano. And he says, Christo, can you touch upon the long wait times for some voters in Texas and California?
Yeah, I mean, one challenge there is, so basically a lot of the, and thank you so much for the super chat, Joseph. I really appreciate it.
I know he's like always here.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And Joseph is a member of the channel as well. So thank you for that as well. Yeah, it was awful. It's awful. It's unacceptable. Like, we have wait times at the polls in Canada sometimes if you go like right after work. But Brianna and I went voting last time. How long did we wait in the polls for a federal election? That was the election, not a primary.
I don't know, 2 minutes?
2 minutes? Maybe. It might have been...
We had to the girls in front of us couldn't find their address.
Yeah, the girls in front of us had to get their address checked. So it took... I think, honestly, if I was to make a real guess, from the time we got into the polling station to the time we left, it was less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, for both of us to vote, get checked in, vote, get out. We brought our son with us, so we were lugging him around. It was still 10 minutes.
We were lugging him around?
Well, it was in the stroller. I'm just saying.
Who was in charge of that?
I'm just saying.
Okay.
Yeah. So to see people have to wait hours, not like 20, 30 minutes, but hours.
At least 7 hours.
Yeah, in some cases, 7 hours is unacceptable. I mean, in Texas, it's clearly rooted in with the GOP's attacks on minority voters. Like, let's be real. Like, in those states in particular, they don't want minority voters voting. They also don't want students voting. Those populations, when they do vote Democrat, right? And in terms of California, I don't know if I can fully explain it as much. Maybe they don't want young people voting as well because the Democrats in those states worry about progressive Democrats getting elected. So, they worry about being challenged by the left. And so by limiting the amount of polling stations on campuses and stuff, they can, Then then they feel that they can, they can just ignore things, right? I think I got, let me see.
No, you didn't.
There we go. I think I might have got them. There we go. There we go.
There, yeah.
Okay. So, sorry about that, guys. I was just clearing that. So basically, it's unacceptable. I don't know if it's nefarious in this particular case. What I do know is that this is it should be unconstitutional, because one of the arguments that I've heard from people is that when you have to wait that long, there's a good chance you might miss work or things like that. And it's effectively a poll tax for shift workers. And it's illegal to have a poll tax. You used to have it in like Jim Crow days where you would have you'd have a poll tax, but you wouldn't charge white people. And the whole point was to depress black voter turnout, of course. And so all of these... suppress.
Maybe they were like depressed because they couldn't vote, but
well, yes, maybe they're depressed that they couldn't vote. But that's certainly the case. So it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. I don't know what effect it had last night. Did it, for instance, drive Bernie's turnout lower because it hurt students? Maybe. But if it's happening in black communities, guys, maybe it drove Biden's vote lower because Biden did very well among African American voters last night. So I don't know. I don't know, but it's depressing to see nonetheless.
Okay, we have another. Can you stop playing with the screen?
I know somebody just said Warren dropped out, and I don't know if they're just joking or things like that. I want to check that.
Oh, okay. So should we play the Jeopardy theme or?
Okay. I'll check later.
Okay. So we have another super chat from Karen Zita.
Yeah.
And she says Trump troll in the chat means you made it. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. We get our trolls every now and then. Thank you so much, Karen, for the comment and the support. Back during the Canadian election, we used to get a lot of PPC trolls in the chat.
Yes.
We had like one PPCer that was like a bit of a troll, but like in like the constructive way, like they were a bit sarcastic, but they were like asking questions and stuff. Yeah, but most of them were just like PPC, Max 2020. Remember?
That was a very good description.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so you ready for another Canadian question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Zach Palmeter says, have the Liberals said anything about pharmacare after the NDP tabled it?
To my knowledge, they haven't really. I mean, they've been very disappointing. Well, look, have they disappointed me? No, because I know I know the Liberal Party. I know them better than most. They're not good folks, but there was a hope from a lot of Canadians, including Liberal voters, that when this Parliament was formed, there would be cooperation on pharmacare. And there was some polling done, I believe, by Abacus. And I did a video on it just a few days after the federal election. So go back and check that out if you want to see my coverage then. Where I looked at that polling and it showed that when you ask general Canadian populations and Liberal voters, what do you want from this minority government? Because by that point we knew that the NDP and the Liberals could hypothetically, if they wanted to, form like a majority coalition, because together they added up to more than 180 seats. You need 170 to be a majority, so it would be like a really strong cooperation, right? Mm-hmm. So that was the hope, and right at the top of the list, I believe, was pharmacare. It was pharmacare, taxing the rich, dental care was on the list, and from the Liberals, what we've seen thus far is, well, they're not moving on pharmacare, and they're not moving on dental care. We promoted a dental care plan that would basically not actually cost a single dime more than the Liberal budget, because the Liberals are giving tax cuts to not wealthy people, but to very comfortable people making more than $90,000 a year, which, again, not families, individuals. Making more than $90,000 a year who don't really need a tax cut, I would say. I know people that make 90 grand a year aren't rich, but they probably don't need a tax cut. And so what the NDP said was, instead of giving a tax cut to people that make between 90 and 170 grand a year, give the tax cut to people that make less than 90 grand a year, and give every single person that makes under 90 grand a year dental care, which would give between 4 and 6 million Canadians dental care. It's not a universal single-payer program. It's not ideal, but it's something that could be done quickly and efficiently in a minority government. And the Liberals rejected it, and the Conservatives rejected it, and the Bloc rejected it. I don't know what the Greens did on it. I don't know what they did. But the other parties, the Greens don't have party status, the other parties all rejected it. Unacceptable, but not surprising. And so I don't know if we're going to see any movement on pharmacare in this minority parliament. My inkling is that the Liberals would rather spend $6 billion a year on tax cuts than invest that in something that'll help all Canadians.
They could buy another pipeline.
They could buy another pipeline, indeed. They might. Who knows?
They have to pay for this one twice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Deborah Hennessy says, I didn't know you're Canadian. I'm new to your channel, and I grew up in East York in Greektown in Toronto.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, no, I'm for those in recent weeks and stuff, I've been covering the U.S. election more because it's heating up. And if I'm being frank, it drives more viewers to the channel, which is always nice to see. But I do cover Canadian content. I do want to get into it a little bit more as we move forward. But if you look to some of my earlier videos, the Canadian content is there. I grew up in New Brunswick, and I currently live in Southern Ontario as well. Yeah, it's wonderful here. Brianna and I love spending time in Greektown, in Toronto in general. We always love making our trips there. It's always fun. We love because I am my father was born in Greece, so I'm half Greek, so it's always fun to visit Greektown, and Brianna loves Greek food, so I mean it's a match made in heaven.
Isn't it? Okay.
Oh.
You're
Everyone saw that.
You're such
People are gonna think that you don't love me as much.
Stop, that's embarrassing.
I know, I'm teasing.
Okay, Justin Frederick says, Tulsi Gabbard just sent an email to supporters that her campaign is continuing, announcing new events. What is your take on her stubbornness remaining in the race despite winning only one delegate?
Well, to be clear, Warren did win more than one delegate last night. That was just, for much of the night, she really only had one delegate, right? She basically had that one delegate from one of the states, but Massachusetts hadn't had its delegates allocated yet. So Warren, I think, won a couple dozen delegates last night, but the point in general stands that, like, Warren was, I don't know if she was deluded into it by her team or if she self-deluded or maybe it was a mixture, but I think she thought that she could win a bunch of delegates, that she would be viable in every state last night, and that maybe Bernie would win last night, and that would, like, because if Warren's dream scenario, if she wanted to end up being the nominee, was Bernie does well, Biden struggles, and she does decently, and therefore that makes it basically impossible for anyone to get a majority if three people are racking up good amounts of delegates. But because Bernie would be in the lead and Biden would be weak, it would give Warren a greater chance to become the emergency pick at the convention when they steal it from Bernie. Because let's be real, like, I know we have a lot of criticisms of Warren. She's not nearly as progressive as we've seen, like, relative to how she acts, right? Like, when the chips are down, she's not where she needs to be. But Warren, on her wealth tax alone, just one of her policies, will likely never be acceptable by the Democratic establishment. So Warren would never be given the emergency pick. They'd much rather just draft Michelle Obama or somebody like that, or get Oprah to stand in and just take all the delegates. Like, they would try anything before giving it to Warren. The only way is if the only choice was literally if they had, like, if there was, like, it's Bernie or Warren, only way Warren could get the nod from the party, unless she won the convention herself, which isn't possible anymore. And I think that was her intent. But it was never clear that that was going to happen. Bernie was either going to win big or it was going to be very close, and that means that Biden would be clearly the backup choice. So I don't know. I don't know what she's doing. It's certainly distressing because, look, Buttigieg and Klobuchar both dropped out at the drop of a hat right after South Carolina. And Warren was polling better in most polls nationally than Klobuchar and Buttigieg, but Warren didn't, like, Buttigieg won Iowa, right? Like, we all know he didn't win Iowa, but Buttigieg had a very strong Iowa and a very strong New Hampshire, you know? And Klobuchar had a decent Iowa and a decent New Hampshire. And, like, I would say that in many ways, Warren was not really performing better than either of them. And they both dropped out. So I do think it says something about Warren not falling in line for the progressive cause like the neoliberals did, right? Even Bloomberg, who's been a Democrat, like, who's not a real Democrat, and people say, well, Bernie's not a Democrat, but Bernie's caucused with the Democrats for decades, right? And he fell in line behind Joe Biden. Just did it just today. It's just easy.
You know, the question was about Tulsi Gabbard, right?
Oh, sorry. I got carried away. Tulsi Gabbard. Okay. Tulsi Gabbard is sort of irrelevant. And I'm not even trying to be mean about it.
Do you think she's angling for a position?
I don't think there's a position for Gabbard in a cabinet. Because of her vote on impeachment, she buried herself maybe forever in the Democrats. right? You agree or disagree. Impeachment was widely popular with Democratic voters. And so opposing that really, and I don't think it's fair that Hillary Clinton calls her a Russian asset. I actually think she's right to sue Clinton because I do think that's libel. But like she is not popular. And the thing is she's not popular with Republicans either. When they did favorability polling for like all the Democratic candidates with the general electorate, she was consistently at the bottom. So it's not like, okay, Democratic establishment people don't like her, but she's popular with Republicans and independents, so she could be a good crossover candidate. There's no evidence to that. So, Tulsi Gabbard, I thought she would have done what Andrew Yang did. Which is to run a campaign, build a national profile, build a base of support, maybe carry that into another political run in the near future, or parlay that into a media gig. And I think honestly, I think Tulsi Gabbard, you're going to see her on Fox News. And in the next couple of years. She's young, she's photogenic, she's been on Fox a ton, not just a couple times, but a fairly regular appearance on Fox. And she could be somebody that Fox could tout as a disgruntled Democrat, troubled by the elite party establishment, and just wants to find the truth, regardless of party affiliation. Welcome to the Tulsi Hour. That's Tulsi's show.
Oh, for God's sake.
So that's what I think she's going to do. But I'm surprised she hasn't done it yet. Why she's in thus far, I don't know. Maybe she really wanted to win a delegate last night. I honestly don't know. But another factor is that Tulsi, unlike a lot of the other campaigns, like say Kamala Harris's campaign, never expected to win. Tulsi knew she could never actually win this. It was never a possibility, ever. Kamala Harris was very much a contender to win. A lot of people, I don't know if Brandon's still here, but a lot of reasonable people were like, she could win this. She's going to be a favorite at least. She's going to be at the top with Bernie and Biden and Warren. And it just didn't happen. And one of the reasons is that she struggled with fundraising, but she ran a campaign to win, right? She ran a campaign to win and didn't. And then when you do that, you lose your money. And then you have to shut down because you're hemorrhaging. Gabbard's like, look, I got a couple million in the bank. I don't know how many staff she has. I don't know how much she's actually spending, relative to her donor base and the size of her campaign. So it's not an issue. And the only thing that prevents you from running is money, right? Ronan, I know you're trying to help, but please don't spam. It makes it harder for everyone else to read. You're right. Joe Biden has plagiarized before, multiple times. And he's lied about his own qualifications and his own valor. It's really despicable. But yeah, so Gabbard, I don't know what her plan is, but I think she's angling for a media gig. Because her political career in a traditional sense is over, I think. For now. Maybe
Forever?
She's young. Maybe she can come back in 10 years, but people are not going to forgive her for the impeachment thing. And
People will forget in a year.
And Republicans, I don't know if they'll welcome her either. She doesn't poll well with Republicans.
Okay. Jake Sisko says, will Biden run with a Republican running mate?
He has said that. One of the things I've noted on the channel over the past few months whenever I talk about Joe Biden is that he seems hell-bent on letting people know that he likes Republicans, and not in the sense that even Bernie Sanders has said sometimes that there are issues where I feel perfectly comfortable working across the aisle. Bernie's talked about working with Mike Lee on constraining the president's power in terms of what's the word I'm looking for? War declarations, right? That Bernie Sanders really wants to make sure that, and a lot of conservative Republicans who value the Constitution at least somewhat, want to make sure the president doesn't unilaterally start declaring, acts of aggression across the ocean, because the president does not have that power as per the Constitution. It rests in the legislatures. And so there's that. But Biden's like, the Republicans are good. I don't want to see the Republican Party lose too badly because that will make the country too left-wing. When the Republicans lose and Trump is gone, they're going to return to normal. All of this is BS. Because like Mitch McConnell was stealing Supreme Court seats before Trump was the nominee. Certainly before Trump was the president, right? Like these people were awful and remain awful and will always remain awful, right? And this is compared to the Democrats who are also awful. So even like the Republicans are that bad, right? They're even worse than the Democrats. And like Biden seems hell-bent on defending them, and he has noted that he would consider picking a Republican. Now, I don't think he's going to do it. One, if he picks a Republican, it's a bad strategic move because the Republicans right now are not popular with Democrats. This is not an era where the average Democrat is looking to move across the aisle. This isn't like the 2000s or the 90s. Like, the Democratic base hates the Republican Party, and rightfully so, because they truly are monstrous. And I don't think they are going to tolerate such a pick. And I don't know, and I think like strategically, if they pick a Republican, then I think that would give like Bernie or Busters like greater ideological cover for not voting for Biden. If they say, well, you're picking a Republican, I'm not voting for a Republican to be my vice president, given that Joe Biden is, frankly, starting to lose his mind and he's in his late 70s. Like, I'm not doing that, right? And so I'm going to vote for somebody else. I'm not endorsing that. And another factor is if you look at the main Republicans, there's very little diversity amongst their leadership. And I really do think Biden is going to pick a woman of color. He certainly has to pick somebody with some diversity. So I think you might see him pick Kamala Harris or Stacey Abrams or I think actually those two are probably front runners. If I'm being personally, I think they're probably front runners. That he's going to pick a relatively young black woman because the black vote is so important to the party. Because even though Warren and Abrams aren't, or Harris and and Abrams aren't particularly progressive, a lot of people will be inspired by the history that represents, and I think that's where he's gonna go. That's my view. And so, and like, if you're looking for black female leadership, it's almost entirely within the Democratic Party. He's not picking Diamond and Silk guys. Those are for those who don't know, Diamond and Silk are. I don't want to be like, they're basically like caricatures of black women. They're actually black women, but they sort of play it up for Trump's far right base. And they basically like, you know, are like a comedy troupe that like defends Trump. And they're like, all actually black women love Trump, but you know.
I see. Okay. So this is probably my last question.
Okay.
And then I'm going to go after you answer it.
Okay.
Because I need to show you where we are.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. This is Cave Dweller 333. Do you think some of the primaries last night, Selma Hernandez and Jessica Cisneros, hold greater implications or are a result of more isolated factors?
Yeah. So last night, some of the down ballot races didn't go well for progressives. Jessica Cisneros ran against Cuellar. I think it's Henry Cuellar. It's like spelt like Quellar, but I think it's Cuellar. In like a Texas congressional district. And Cuellar's not just like a moderate. It's not like you're running against like a middle of the road Democrat who should still be primaried. Like he votes with Trump 70% of the time. Doesn't believe in women's bodily autonomy. Has fundamental issues that should make him disqualified for even moderate Democrats. And yet Pelosi backed him and the establishment backed him. Cisneros was endorsed by Bernie and Warren, to give credit to Warren. Warren endorsed her. And AOC and the squad and all of that. And it was very close, but she still lost. Also, Cenk Uygur, the head of the Young Turks, frankly did very poorly in his run. I believe he got less than 10% of the vote. I don't know if he picked the wrong district or if he overemphasized his chances of victory, but that didn't go well for him. Yeah, these are probably signs that in a lot of these parts of the country, we do need to find better ways to get progressives engaged and elected. I think it's challenging because we need all hands on deck to get Bernie. And that does mean that in some ways, local campaigns are struggling. But I think it's also like, there's going to be continued victories. I think one victory last night, we don't know what it'll ultimately entail, but Shahid Buttar is going to be on the ballot in November. And so the way they do it in California is rather interesting. There's not a limit to how many Republicans and Democrats can be on the ballot. So what happens is the primary is actually just multiple Democrats and Republicans who run. And then unless somebody gets above 50% in that primary, the election in November is between the top two people. And so that could conceivably be two Democrats. And so what's happened in Nancy Pelosi's district is that she was challenged by Shahid Buttar and some Republicans or whatever. But Shahid Buttar got enough support to finish second, and Pelosi, I don't think, got 50%. And so he is going to be on the ballot in November. And so you can't even make the vote splitting argument because Nancy Pelosi can't lose to a Republican. She can only lose to a Democrat. And I think that would be great to see. So there were some good results last night. And AOC was tweeting about some other results as well. But yeah, it wasn't the best night even down ballot. It wasn't.
Okay. So this is the next question is Joseph Mangano.
Yeah.
So you need to find it.
Yeah. Can you read it?
Yeah. Well. Okay. It says.
Just read, and I can use a keyword.
Okay. Shift.
Maybe I can.
Oh wait. No, we're way up. Just maybe search his name.
Yeah. Well, he might have typed something since.
Well, probably, but no, not that one.
Okay, I might just have to.
Here, why don't I just find it?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, you know what? Hold on. I'll read it to you, and then I'll go
Okay.
under and fix it.
Okay.
Okay. So Joseph Mangano says, "Do you think Biden's winning in states in which he had little to no organization speaks to a shift in the way campaigns might be run in the future? Can you comment on this?"
Yeah, I mean, I think.
I'm gonna like.
Yeah, it might have been lost because it stops auto scrolling at some point.
Is my head in the frame?
I don't know. I can only tell if you show me the other thing. So basically, maybe because Trump actually didn't have nearly as much organization as Clinton did and still won. Social media and other forms of media don't replace traditional campaigning, but they do more than they used to given their ubiquity. And Biden, like Trump, got a lot of free media. Biden basically got 3 full days of uncritical coverage to reestablish him as the front runner. And I think that that's worth so much in an age where most boomers and like older Gen Xers and folks that are older than boomers, like senior citizens, they watch cable news. They watch CNN, they watch MSNBC, they watch Fox, they watch ABC, CBS, whatever. They don't really watch the Christo Avalise show or the Young Turks or David Dole or Mike Figueredo. They don't watch us, right? Like my audience is very young. Not everyone, but most of my audience is in their 20s and 30s and 40s, and probably much more in the 20s and 30s. You know what I mean? That's where it is. And so I do think that really matters. But I think there are other factors too. Other factors include the effect of endorsements. Those endorsements mattered. And 2 of those endorsements came in key states. It might just be lost, babe. I might just have to start from the top.
Yeah, I'm trying to find you one.
Okay. So In Minnesota, Klobuchar's endorsement clearly helped Joe Biden. There's no doubt about it. And in Texas, Beto O'Rourke's endorsement likely helped Biden there too, probably with populations he was struggling with. He didn't win Latinos, but maybe he got some votes because of Beto's support. And so, and of course you add to that Warren. You add to that Warren's remaining in the race, dividing up progressive votes in some of those states. So it's hard to say exactly, but you're right that at least in some ways, campaigns are never just about mass media, but they're also never about knocking on doors. Totally. It's a mixture. It's a mixture of various factors, right? So that's something to certainly consider.
Okay. So your next question is right here.
Okay.
Well, next comment.
Okay.
And I'm gonna leave.
So guys, Brianna is heading out, guys. She's gonna go to bed. If you could you get me a glass of water? Sorry.
You want me to get you a glass of water?
Yes, I'm thirsty.
What did your last maid die of?
Oh, babe. Okay. So Brianna's gonna grab me a glass of water, and I'm going to kind of follow on with questions. Brianna was following on the chat stream, and I'm following on my YouTube hub. If I missed any particular question, maybe ask it. I'll try to get to it at the bottom, but I'm going to continue on. I'll probably go until 10, maybe a little bit later tonight. We'll give it a kind of wait-and-see attitude. So Vince says, FYI, The Guardian is reporting that Warren and Bernie delegates are in meetings to push for a common progressive agenda. I am paraphrasing. Yeah, Vince, I've seen that too. Others have noted that while no decisions appear to have been made yet, there's meetings by Bernie Sanders. Bernie's talked with Warren, but also delegates are talking with one another. Various progressive organizations that have endorsed one or both of Bernie and Warren are talking. And so I do think that's encouraging, and I hope it leads to an endorsement of Bernie Sanders. Again, I know that Warren wanted to be president, and I know that she would have been a good president. She would have been. Not great, but good. But, the path isn't open for her anymore. And, simple as that. And maybe she can run again later on. She's 70. And so, God forbid, if Biden gets picked and loses to Trump, Warren could run in 4 years again. She still has time, right? She still has time. Lisa says, a lot of people are sticking with Warren just because she's a woman. Not sure they would come to Bernie. They still blame him for Hillary's loss. I mean, to some degree, that's probably true. But the Morning Consult poll from just a few days ago, maybe things have shifted since all of this happened, but shows that Bernie Sanders gets about 40% of Warren's vote. So Bernie doesn't get all of Warren's vote, but Bernie gets more of Warren's vote than Biden. And I think that's crucial. And I think more than that, Bernie getting Warren's endorsement brings those people over. It gives people an excuse to support Bernie who weren't. And it allows Bernie to get this down to a one-on-one strict comparison with Joe Biden. And Bernie needs that right now. Somebody like Warren 2020, we have a Warren supporter here, and they say look, I would be down for a Bernie Warren VP ticket. And look, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed. The one thing is I don't think Bernie is going to pick Warren, and I don't think, for instance, Warren would pick Bernie. Both of them being from New England, both of them being white, both of them being super old, in relative terms, right? They're both old people. Even Warren's 70. They couldn't be VP, I don't think. I would consider it, but I think Warren would, you would give her, Treasury board. You would make her the Secretary of the Treasury, or you would give her, frankly, a job more important than Vice President, I think. And it's because I think Bernie especially would need to pick somebody, a woman of color. And Warren might want to pick again, somebody younger. Maybe that she could have the luxury of picking a man, but she would likely pick somebody younger, right? Sorry, somebody says Gabbard. I know, guys, I was talking about Gabbard. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a little bit tired the last couple days. I know I botched that question. Well, Warren 2020 says, in that case, why not Warren? Warren is popular with anyone, with everyone. Well, the thing with that, Warren 2020, is that, and maybe polling has shifted, but as early as last week, I was covering it on this channel, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren were both the most popular people in the Democratic Party. They both had the highest favorability ratings, and they were essentially tied. So this narrative that the people in the party don't like Bernie is not true. Like, we see on Twitter that, like, Twitter neoliberals don't like Bernie. But average Democrats, when that polling was done at least, liked Bernie way more than they liked Biden, and liked Warren way more than they liked Biden. Bernie and Warren were way more popular than Buttigieg and Klobuchar and all the neoliberals. 100%. 100%. So it's not really that one was more popular than the other. They were all popular. And if you look at the federal level, like beyond the Democratic Party, about a week and a bit ago, the Associated Press did a poll about national favorability ratings, not just by party. Independents, Republicans, and Democrats were asked to give a favorability rating to Trump and all the people running for the Democrats. And the only person to beat Trump in national favorability was Bernie. Warren was right behind, but Bernie beat Trump and Warren didn't, right? So Bernie's actually the most popular person in the race when you ask regular Americans. Maybe that's changed in the last few days, but that's been the case for weeks now. So we have a super chat by Not Provided. Are you still confident Bernie is the presumptive nominee? No, I am not anymore. I was confident, guys. Some of that was puffery, of course, because I'm a Bernie guy and you want to portray confidence, but no, I'm not. But I'm not confident that Biden would be either. Right? Like, right now, things are still volatile. We don't know what's going to happen with Warren. We don't know what the ultimate effect of long-term effects of everyone dropping out are. We don't know what the kind of, even if Warren stayed in, we don't know how the debates would be so different. Because if we operate under the assumption that Warren is in, then we're going to have a 3-person debate. The debates have always had, like, no fewer than 6 people. And so we go from 6 to 3 is a fundamental change in not only the amount of time a person is exposed to the moderators and to their competitors and to the audience, but just like the way the debates will work. Like, you can structure questions and entire debates differently when you have 2 or 3 or 4 people on the stage instead of 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, right? Like, the simple reality. So I would suggest that there's a lot of volatility. Right now, Biden's the favorite again. He's got the momentum. He's got the party behind him more than he did before even. He's going to have a delegate lead. One of the challenges with Bernie is that he won California and had a decent Texas, but he needed to do better to keep on the pace he wanted to set. Again, it doesn't mean he can't win, but now it means that he has to find gains later on in the cycle. And states like Florida are still coming, and Florida is going to be a tough one for Bernie. So Bernie has to find spaces in the map where he can gain back delegates from Biden and limit the losses he takes in states like Florida. And so it's going to be challenging, but Bernie can do it. Like Joseph says for Warren 2020, like, no, Warren I don't think serves as a VP. Not that she can't do it. Not that she wouldn't be a decent VP. The problem with Warren is that, like, demographically, Bernie would have to pick. He would have to pick a woman of color. So Dan Corbett raises an interesting point. Cordoba, yeah. when he says that in most states, and sometimes by big margins, Medicare for all polled very well, even as some of these states voted for Biden. Now, some of that has to do with split votes in some of the states, like Biden won, but Warren and Bernie together beat him. But I think it shows a couple things. I've heard in some of the states that Biden was actually, people assumed Biden supported Medicare for all, which of course isn't true, but that would maybe show why Biden was doing well, because people just assumed he supported this progressive policy, even though, he never has. Well, he used to, as I noted in my video earlier today, but he never has in recent history. And so it makes you think, like, what's going on there? And I wonder if people are so scared into voting for are so scared about losing to Trump that they support Medicare for all. They support it, but they fear that other people don't and won't vote for it. So it's like, I like this policy, but I don't want to lose the election, so I'm going to vote for the guy that doesn't support this policy. And that could be part of it too. Raphael says that Kamala doesn't have anything to offer. I mean, look, on the one hand, you might have a point. Kamala Harris is from California, and so it's like you want your VP to help you deliver votes. And if you're running for president as a Democrat, California is about as safe a big state as you're going to get. The Democrats don't lose California in modern times. Simple as that. So you're right that Abrams might be a better pick because she might help you deliver the South. Maybe you don't actually win a lot of states, but you actually need help in those states. You don't need help in California. So that is a point. Aaron Clemens says debates are petering out to keep Joe from speaking in public as little as possible. I mean, maybe. Right now it's hard to say for sure because we don't necessarily know, right? We don't necessarily know. So I had to refresh the stream there, guys. And then I also, because I wasn't seeing some of these new super chats. So I wanted to make sure I got them. So I'm going to try to find my space. If I can't, I'll just head back to things. So Adam says, and again, thanks for the support, Adam. What are the key states going forward for Bernie? Well, I mean, it's cliche, but like every state matters. And what I mean by that is even in states that Bernie's going to lose, he's got to lose less than he was planning to. Bernie had like a roadmap to a plurality. A majority was going to be unlikely given like the math, but he had a roadmap to a plurality. And it was like, win these states big, get viable in these states, and on and on and on. Bernie did one thing well last night, which is that he remained viable, I believe, in every state, which is great to see. It means that he got delegates everywhere. He didn't get shut out in some of the southern states. That's something he needs to maintain. But, like, he needs to do really well. I think key states are Michigan. It's a big one. He needs to do well in Michigan. That's next week. It's a crucial state. It's not a massive state, but it's a bigger one. He needs to win Michigan, I believe. Margins might matter in Michigan, but I wonder if Bernie can just win by a few points. It'll be less important that Bernie picks up delegates there, and more important that he shifts the narrative about the race going forward. Another state that's key for Bernie, I think, is going to be New York. New York is a very big state. It's one of the, because again, you think there's 4 states that are really big. California, Texas, which have already finished, and Florida, New York. They have a ton of delegates, right? Florida's going to be bad for Bernie. So there it's about mitigation. And I think New York, can Bernie get people to the polls? Did Bernie Sanders get non-registered Democrats to switch their registration early enough, because that was a big issue 4 years ago in the New York primary. Will AOC and Cynthia Nixon and Bill de Blasio, will they be able to help Bernie Sanders in New York State? And if so, can Bernie Sanders score a big victory in New York? Like, that's another state that's going to matter for Bernie. There are also some caucus states left. There's not as many caucuses this time. Bernie Sanders has to look to rack up big wins in the caucuses. Joe Biden struggled in the caucuses because he doesn't have a lot of enthusiasm, and Bernie Sanders could look to win caucuses big and help to build some momentum. Those are some of the big things I'm looking forward to. Ryan says, isn't it suspicious that the only states that are still quote-unquote counting votes are states that Bernie won? Well, I don't want to be too conspiratorial, Ryan. One factor is that those states were the 5 states that the 3 of the states that Bernie won went later on in the night. Bernie won Vermont, of course, as he was expected to do, but then lost Virginia. I'm just sorry if I'm looking off the camera here, but I'm just looking at the map here. And then, he lost all the 7:30 and 8 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. closing states. He lost them all. Some of them by very small margins. Like, he just barely lost Maine. He just barely lost, he was somewhat close in Massachusetts. Thank you, Liz. But he didn't win any of those states. And then he won Colorado, which closed at 9. I don't know why Colorado's is only at 79%. And then the last 2 states were Utah and California. Utah closed at 10 Eastern, and California closed at 11. So, to be fair, it does seem like part of this is driven by the fact that his states went later. I think, again, maybe there's a conspiracy there, but I don't know if I see one. I don't know if I see one, guys. I mean, I think last night it did seem like when Biden was going to win a state immediately, they were much more eager to call it for Biden than they were for Bernie. That's something I noticed, but I don't know if they're purposely slow counting the Bernie states. I don't know. Rock Lee tweets, or sends a super tweet. Sorry, Rock Lee with a super chat says he has to win Michigan, Illinois. I believe I don't always know my state initials. Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Arizona, minimize Missouri loss. I think that's probably pretty accurate. I think he can win Michigan. I think he can. He won it against Clinton. If Warren's splitting the vote, guys, it's going to be real hard. Warren drops out and endorses Bernie. It could change the game. Warren's popular. Warren's a popular person. And Warren endorsing Bernie will matter. It will. A lot, potentially. Maybe Bernie still loses, but it's like it gets him back in the game. And Warren endorsing Bernie, and maybe it was good that Warren didn't endorse Bernie today. Maybe it's good that Warren waits a day or two, because it's soon enough. It's far enough away from the next votes that people can adjust, but it's close. It's far enough away from Super Tuesday that the Super Tuesday Newsday cycle dies, because Super Tuesday's over. We know Biden won. The margins are what we're determining. And now you can sort of wipe the slate clean with a big endorsement by Liz Warren of Bernie. And so, it could help in states like Michigan. Illinois is another big one that's going to be important. I wonder if maybe Biden gets a bump because Obama was an Illinois senator, but I don't know if that's going to matter. But that's a crucial one. Ohio, you're right, and that's a state that the Republicans have been making more and more red, but some polling has indicated that Bernie Sanders is up against Trump by 3 points in Ohio, and Biden isn't, to my knowledge. And then finally, Missouri, I think you're right. It's about minimizing losses. But I do think Bernie has an outside chance in that state. He has an outside chance. But you're right. I think Michigan, he has to win that one for sure. Warren 2020 says Bernie needs 54% to win the nomination. I mean, some of that's going to depend, Warren 2020, on the divisions of the states and all of those sorts of things. I mean, in terms of win, I don't know if it's quite so lopsided, because the distance in delegates between Bernie and Biden in terms of percentage is actually only about 1 and a little bit percent. So I don't know if he needs to beat Biden 54-46, or is that to win a majority of delegates? I'm not sure, because it doesn't seem like Bernie needs to beat Biden by that much if he does it across every state. Well, somebody like Chorka Lupa, I hope I said that right. Superdelegates will just appoint Biden. It's going to be a sad, sad day. You know, look, if that happens, that happens. But make the Democratic Party do it. Make them. Would they have done it with Clinton? I think they would have. But they were able to say that Clinton won a majority of elected delegates. You could complain about all the issues with that campaign, and there were a lot. But Clinton won. Like, you could think it was fair or not, but Clinton didn't need the superdelegates. The superdelegates were not necessary for Clinton to win the nomination in 2016. And so we don't know what the superdelegates will do. And if they really do steal it from Bernie, like, it's going to take a lot of thought about what that's going to mean. So make them do it. Florida's the most backward state in the union. I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, like, look, there's 50 states, but Florida does seem to be, even when Bernie was surging, guys, even like last week, before South Carolina, after Nevada, when it was looking great for Bernie, he was still losing Florida big to Biden and Bloomberg too. So Florida's always been a rough one for Bernie, guys. Yeah, a reader asks, like, what do people see in Biden? like he's got all the gaffes. He's clearly losing it. He's got he could get Me Too'd. He's not even that inspiring. I think part of the issue is that the neoliberal establishment in the party probably didn't want Biden. They would have much rather had Cory Booker or Kamala Harris. Maybe Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar. But what happened was, Biden, for whatever reason, in that early part of the race, monopolized black voters. Like, just undeniably. Even when there was like 10, 12 candidates in the race, Biden was getting 40, 50% of black voters. And so for candidates that like Harris and Booker, who are African American, it made it really difficult for them. And so Booker and Harris, who, again, whether you like them or not, are like well-spoken, they're young, they're sharp, whatever. Like, they don't have the issues that Biden has. Like, they were never able to get a foothold because Biden dominated key constituencies that they needed to start building a national movement. And so they went out. And so then what you had left was, leaving aside Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard, because they made their contributions, but they were never going to win. It left you with, like, Bernie and Warren, who were the two progressives. Again, we classify Warren however, but everyone but the left definitely puts her on the left, and even some on the left put her on the left. So you had Bernie and Warren running for the left. Like, that was the one lane. And then you had Biden and Buttigieg and Klobuchar running for the center. But the problem was always that when you polled people who were not white, what you saw was Bernie Sanders was in a clear second with African Americans, and he was in a clear first with Hispanic voters. And so even if you, again, didn't want Biden because of the gaffes, because of the scandals, because, again, of the fact that he doesn't know his wife from his sister, and he doesn't know the Pledge of Allegiance, and he doesn't know what office he's running for some nights. You were stuck with him. Because if you force Biden out, Bernie wins with black voters. They go to Bernie before they go to Pete. Or at least they don't go to Pete enough to give the neoliberals decisive victories. The black vote splinters, and that's good enough for Bernie. Bernie's fine if he wins half of all the black voters, or even like 40%. And so that's where that's where we're at with that, right? And so they were trapped. Klobuchar and Buttigieg were strong in the early states in a way Booker and Harris were not. But then unlike Booker and Harris, they had no potential growth with non-white voters. And so Biden was the only one left. They were stuck with him. Yeah, I mean, like, Strange Doss says that they think that Biden's going to pick Abrams. I definitely think she's the favorite. I haven't checked, like, betting markets or anything, but she's got to be high up on that list. Not really a hard left-winger, but not a conservative either. People will like that he chose a black woman. She's from the South. She has national recognition. I think, like, from an objective perspective, she would be a strong pick. I think Abrams is near the top of the list. Adam Burke says, just love to see how much this channel has grown. Adam, thank you so much. Adam's probably been one of my, relatively earliest viewers. I don't know if I have a list of my earliest viewers, but he's got to be one of the first. So, thank you so much for the wonderful comment. I really appreciate it, Adam. And thanks for the donation. Pyro says, I think Bernie should pick Jim Clyburn. I mean, look, Jim Clyburn did a number on Bernie, guys. I don't know how much the Clyburn endorsement mattered directly. Because, like, maybe what Clyburn's endorsement did was, say, give Biden an extra 10% in South Carolina. And giving Biden that extra 10% was what gave the media more of an excuse to play up South Carolina. And maybe if Biden's win is 10-15% smaller in South Carolina, the narrative isn't as strong. And if the narrative isn't as strong, maybe you don't as easily force out Klobuchar and Buttigieg. And if you don't force them out, maybe you don't get that big bump at your rally in Dallas. And if you don't get your big bump, maybe Bernie Sanders still wins Super Tuesday. And Biden doesn't see a last minute surge in California, and he loses Texas, and he loses Minnesota, and on, right? Like, Clyburn, like, saved Biden, I think. I think that might be a crucial moment. Well, Chorka says Florida's its own planet. They are alien to the rest of us. One thing I've heard about Florida, maybe Americans on the channel can let me know if this is the full reason, but I think Florida gets a reputation for being crazy because it is a little bit, but also because Florida, like, makes its crime records public more easily. So, Florida Man, the Florida Man things are possible in Florida because of the way they publicize those records. So there's better stories about, like, crazy people in Florida. Onikazi says, so scared about losing to Trump that they chose the guy most likely to lose to Trump. Look, right, if you look at the polling, Bernie and Biden both poll well against Trump. In general, and in a lot of the swing states, too. But I think you got to look beyond polling and look to, like, the narratives. And as I noted on the channel, Joe Biden's narrative isn't very strong, right? I don't know if he'll drive excitement. I don't know if he'll drive turnout. And I don't know if he'll, like, he has the same problem Clinton did, which is that he's a big business, neoliberal, like, Democrat who's supported bad trade deals. and who's supported, making it harder to get bankruptcies, and he supported the Iraq War, and he supported all of these sorts of things, which, again, Trump doesn't actually need to genuinely be seen as more progressive than Biden. But as long as Trump can drag him into the muck, that's all he needs to do to demobilize potential progressive voters. It's what he did with Clinton. But you can't do that to Bernie, because Bernie has fought the trade deals. He's fought for workers. He's been consistent about his values. And so I think, like, Trump thrives when he can position himself as against an establishment. Even though he's literally the president, if you run someone like Biden, he can do that. Again, the reason Trump became the nominee was that he told Republican voters, I'm not like the other Republicans. I care about workers. I care about fair trade deals for workers. I care about protecting our borders. I'm not, a globalist with the corporations. I'm a billionaire, but I'm a billionaire, so I'm not actually tied in to the big donor classes. It was kind of paradoxical, but it convinced people. But Trump was rich, and therefore Trump couldn't be bought. And because Trump couldn't be bought, he was less corporatist than the rest of the Republicans. And that's why he would fight for fair trade deals, and that's why he would protect the borders, and on and on and on. And then when he went to the general, he said some of the same things. Clinton doesn't care about workers. Clinton doesn't care about fair trade deals. Clinton doesn't care about our communities. And he was right. Clinton doesn't give a single damn about working class people. She doesn't. Trump doesn't either, though. But the point was, it convinced people that maybe Trump is worth taking a gamble on. Or, more importantly, it convinced people to stay home. And the Republicans win when people stay home. Biden will face that. And this is all on top of the fact of Burisma and his son and all of those scandals. Again, Trump's got way more scandals than Biden. But it doesn't matter. Trump wins if you're in the muck with him. Bernie's got no muck. There's no muck on Bernie. Wendy Melly says, I will primary Warren. I'm not kidding. Well, I mean, look, I look forward to seeing that. It'll be very interesting. Jonathan Young Cowling asks, is the U.S. party, Green Party, a labor-oriented party? Because here in Canada, the Greens are basically neoliberals with compost bins. The U.S. Green Party is way smaller than the Canadian one, as a proportion even. Like, our Green Party gets a larger national vote share than theirs does. And ours doesn't get it very much. They do seem to be kind of quirky, but they do seem to be generally more left-leaning than our Green Party. Our Green Party is like a centrist party. Like, they're, on some issues, they're more to the left of the Liberal Party. On some, they're more to the right. And so we have in Canada, we have our, like, the NDP, which is like our left-wing party. At least it's center-left, but it's like a left-wing. It's the most left-wing party. And then we have the Liberals and the Greens that are kind of in the center or center-right. And then you have the Conservatives that are on the right or the center-right. Warren's the new darling of the establishment. I don't know if I would go that far. Warren has been positioning herself as the unifying candidate. But, as soon as Warren tries to bring up her policies again, they'll start hating her. Corbin Rempel says that I'm dreaming if Warren endorses Bernie. I mean, maybe. Maybe I'm dreaming that Warren would endorse Bernie after all of this. But it is what it is, right? I mean, I don't know. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were awful to one another in 2008. They were awful to one another. Way worse than anyone in this race has been to anyone else. Warren's treatment of Bernie or anything has been tame compared to the way Clinton and Obama went after one another. So, and they mended fences. And then, so it's possible. It's possible is what I'm saying. Rosema says, Christoph, at least what do you make of Peter MacKay and Aaron O'Toole vowing to have a federal election in the fall? Well, I mean, they can try, but there's a few things that I think would limit them. One, the Conservatives alone don't get to make that decision. The way it works in our parliament right now is the Liberals have a minority government, but it's actually a really stable one. Because to get rid of the government, you need all three of the main opposition parties on board. The Bloc and the Conservatives are the two biggest opposition parties. But together, they don't add up to enough votes to turf the Liberals. So basically, you need to get the Bloc, the NDP, and the Conservatives at the same time, maybe for different reasons, but at the same time to pull the government down. So Peter MacKay doesn't get to make that decision on his own. And right now, I mean, Justin Trudeau is unpopular, but if an election was called today, I don't know if there's a fundamental advantage for any party. And, you know, it's been a little bit of time since the election, but when people were polled after the last election, the vast majority of people polled wanted this government to be given a chance to work. Now, I don't know if they feel like a year will be enough. Like, if we have an election in October again, that this government would have gotten about a year, maybe a little bit less. I don't know. But I feel that's a mistake, and I don't know if they'll actually be able to accomplish that goal. But I think the point of that promise is to just show that they're willing to take on Trudeau and the Liberals. Like, that's the whole point. Like, they want to look tough. Peter MacKay especially has to play this very delicate game, which I think is going to hurt him. I think he's going to be the next leader. But, like, it's going to hurt him because, on the one hand, he wants to portray himself as a moderate for the general election, like for the next federal election, whether it's in the fall or whether it's a year from now or whenever. He wants that because that's how he wins. And Peter MacKay can win. He can. I think that he can carry most of the places that Scheer did and add some places in Ontario and Quebec and the Maritimes that Scheer didn't win. And so the question is, can he do that without pissing off the base of the Conservatives so much that they all go behind Aaron O'Toole or anyone else? Or that, you know, maybe they support Peter MacKay, but they don't support him enthusiastically. And they start to lose donors and they lose volunteers and they lose their activist core. They'll vote for the Conservatives, but they won't, like, you know, go to the trenches with them, right? Like, that matters. Like, the NDP, it's like, we got a lot of voters, but how do you get those voters to become engaged? Because an engaged person is worth many votes for the money they'll give you, for the volunteer man or woman hours they'll give you. Like, that matters so much, right? So I think they're in a bit of a balance, and I think this whole thing it's something I can say to make it look like I'm going to take on Justin Trudeau. I don't know if it's an achievable goal, though. Jeremiah says, I don't see Warren endorsing Bernie. She's still pissed at him for being more popular than she is. Hopefully she will, but I won't count on it. Like, I mean, look, guys, like, maybe I'm in the exception here, where a lot of people are like, I don't see it happening. But for me, at least, I mean, for me, I see that it's not really going to play out. Like, I mean, I don't know, guys. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little optimistic, but I wonder if Warren worries about her legacy and what it means, and she likes to have that image of being a progressive, and so I don't know. A Left State of Mind says, where is your cat? They usually make an appearance. Smokey right now is sleeping on the couch. If Smokey comes over, I'll be sure to have them make a visit on the channel. But a lot of people are right, though, that even if Warren does eventually don't support Bernie, then it would have made a bigger difference a few weeks ago. Even exactly 1 week ago, you know, it would have made a big difference. Bernie still loses South Carolina. Like, let's be real. The amount he lost it by means that even if it went perfectly for Bernie, he loses by like 10. You know what I mean? Somebody said Obama's not a progressive, he's a neoliberal. That's certainly true, but we have to remember Obama ran as something of a progressive in 2008. Now, things were different back then. Bernie Sanders wasn't a national figure. There wasn't like left-wingers like in the media as much. There wasn't like a left-wing independent media as much. Bernie Sanders was just some senator from Vermont at the time. Just you know what I mean? Like it was very new. And in a lot of ways, like what Obama ran as in 2008 for the context of the era was left-leaning. And so I think the argument you make with Obama is that, yeah, when he governed as a neoliberal, but he didn't really run as a strict neoliberal. And relative to the expectations of his time, he ran as something of a major progressive. And so the argument, you can make when you talk about Obama to people is that, yeah, Bernie Sanders has a lot of criticisms of Obama, but Obama undeniably campaigned effectively as a progressive, and he won big because of it. And the last Democrats before him, whether it was, Kerry, or whether after him it was Clinton, they did not campaign as progressives, and they lost. In some cases, they lost quite big. Windy Melly says, would you recommend moving to Canada? Well, it depends, Windy. I mean, Canada's great, but Canada's not such a golden paradise that I would just say you come here. You have to figure out what works for you. Climate. Do you really hate cold weather? Because outside of a few parts in southern British Columbia, you're going to have cold weather for a good chunk of the year. Some places just kind of cold, and some places literally frozen hell cold. Do you have jobs lined up? Right? That's a thing to consider, right? You have to look into that. Are there industries that you're qualified to work in, hiring in towns you're willing to live in? These are standard concerns that you would have about moving to the United States for a different part of the States, or from a different part of any domestic move. Another factor to consider is, you'll have higher healthcare, better healthcare, although it's not perfect. Your dental won't be covered. Your medicines won't be covered. Mental health, eyes aren't covered in most provinces, things like that. But if you really need health insurance, maybe you could move to Canada. One thing Americans might not like, I think it's worth it, but our taxes are higher. Some of our costs are higher. Cost of living can be higher. In terms of housing and in terms of goods, a variety of reasons. One, we do have higher wages in much of Canada. The lowest minimum wages in Canada, I think, are all above $10. Some of the provinces are at 14 or 15. So, the minimum wages are higher, and labor standards are sometimes better. So our costs are higher, but that means that workers are less exploited in Canada than the US, although we still exploit workers. So there's a lot of things to consider. Canada's great. But if you really love, say, living in a low tax area of the United States, like if you live in Texas where you don't pay state tax and things like that, you won't find that in Canada. I mean, there's no sales tax in Alberta, but there's no tax-free provinces or things like that. Let me see. So, okay, let me. Angie says that the only concern for the DNC is that Bernie doesn't win. I mean, I would say that that's not their only concern. They clearly want to win. The Democrats want to win. Even if you consider the fact that the rich treat politics like a game, you still want to win the game. Even if you're just playing cards with your friends, you're playing Monopoly and it doesn't mean anything, you still want to win. So the DNC wants to win this election. They do. But they would rather lose than Bernie win. I do agree with that. Because Bernie changes things so much in favor of regular working people, and he taxes the rich and taxes the donor class and will strike at their core so deeply that they would rather lose. And Chris Matthews, before I know he like retired, but basically he was getting canned. If you guys remember on the day where Bernie dominated Nevada, and like we were just starting to get the results, and so MSNBC was freaking out, and he was like, "Don't you think that some Democrats would rather just have Trump beat Bernie? Because you only lose 4 years, but if Bernie wins the presidency, especially, you get 40 years of a different party." And I mean, I think Chris Matthews, oddly enough, was right that the Democrats would rather lose if it came down to it, because Bernie would transform the party, or at least would have the chance to, into a genuine like party of regular people. The Democrats do not want that. Everyone just ripping Florida right now. Some people are like, "Mate, wait, what about Alabama?" Look, Joseph says Biden's got, the thing, right? Like, guys, like, look, somebody's saying here Biden won states he didn't campaign in or barely campaigned in. It's over. Look, that's not a great sign for Bernie. It's not a great sign. But like, let's be real. Joe Biden is not, like, he has not won this yet. The gaps are not massive. Bernie Sanders has a ton of support. He has a ton of money. He has not the establishment isn't behind him, but he does have like more Congress people and stuff behind him than he ever has. Bernie Sanders is in a decent position still. Bernie can still win this. Now, is it going to require him, scoring some points off Biden in a debate or really getting the attacks on Biden to stick? Yes, it will require that. Or it'll require Biden stepping on a rake. Both of those are possible. But Bernie can still win. He can certainly still win. Love to see it right now on Twitter. It's actually been there for a while. One of the trending topics is hashtag I do not like Joe Biden. Gotta say I'm a big fan of that one, guys. That's a fun one right there. I like that. Let me see. Okay, let me get back to the comments here. Oh, Ben right here. Ben says, thanks for doing Humanist Stream Solidarity. Thank you so much, Ben, for the support and for your comment. Like, again, it was a great honor to do Mike's show. Like, I mean, a lot of people thought I was helping out Mike, and I guess I was, but in many ways, it was a great opportunity for me to reach out to a new audience. And like, if I'm being like just frank about it, guys, like, by the time this night is done, I'll probably have gained 1,000 subscribers. Which, as you guys know, for a channel of my size is massive. That's like, I had 16.4 4 hours ago, and now I'm at about 17.2. So a lot of new subscribers coming in. I've done guest appearances on other shows. I've done interviews with David or with Michael Brooks or others, and that's driven a couple of hundred subscribers. But, doing like my own show, filling in for somebody, has really given me a new audience. So I'm grateful. And if some of you are new people to the channel, like, welcome aboard, and I hope you continue to find content you like, and that, I'll do my best to continue to work with Mike and other progressive YouTubers. Sinistoria says I know I'm behind, guys, but Sinistoria says I'm doing like Brianna and turning in until next time. Yeah, Brianna will stay as long as she can for these things, but, Brianna works a traditional 9 to 5, and I don't, so, it's something to consider. Strangelos says that a lot of voters don't like they need to be told who to vote for. I mean, to a certain degree, but like I think it's also that like it's not that they need to be told, it's that they have certain people they really look up to. And so endorsements matter. It's like, look guys, like if Bernie endorses somebody, then like I bet a lot of us in this chat, not that like we're like sheep or whatever, like we're sheeple. But like if Bernie says he trusts somebody, like that speaks to me. If AOC or Talib or Omar endorse somebody, that speaks to me because I trust them. I don't always agree with them all the time 100%, but generally I trust them. So when their endorsement carries weight. And Jim Clyburn, for a lot of African Americans especially, but just Democrats in general, in South Carolina, but throughout the South, he really does matter. He's an elder statesman of the Democratic Party. He really is a long-time politician, and you can't underestimate that. You might say that some of those voters are low-information voters, but I have to be real. I get a little wary sometimes because it does seem to be implying that, like, African-American voters are low information when I don't think that's the case. And I have to be further, again, here, to further emphasize, these are primaries. Very small proportions of the population vote. The people who are voting at now are rarely low-info voters. Because they're voting in primaries. Like, people who participate in party elections are usually not as low information as the people who are voting only in the general election. The people who only ever vote in November. They never go to primaries. Some people only ever vote for presidential years. Like they don't vote in midterm elections, which is why Democrats struggle. A lot of Democratic voters only vote in presidential years. Republicans always come out. It's a big problem. But the point is that the low info voters haven't even started paying attention yet. The true low info voters. No, Mushroom Steve, yeah, you're right. I mean, like, some of the networks called it, but I was watching David Dole's live stream last night, and at least when he was following it, when, like, some of the states that were called for Biden went up a lot faster than others. You're right, though. I did see Colorado get immediately called for Bernie, but not by one of the networks David's was flipping around. It was weird. Right at 9 o'clock, AP called it. A lot of some of the networks called it, but not all of them did. It was interesting. Onikazi says, like, what do older African Americans see in Biden? Look, I can't speak for African Americans at all, but one of the arguments I've heard in general about African American voters, and this probably applies more to older voters than younger, is that they do not trust the ability of progressives to win because they understand the worst of white America. Right? Like, they've seen the worst historically and today of white people and what they have done and what they are possible of, what they are capable of. And like, I'm not trying to tar and feather any particular person. You know what I mean? I'm not, but I'm saying, like, this is a perception. And they almost fear, like, even if Biden is objectively more racist and gives less of a damn about black people or non-white people than Bernie Sanders, there's a feeling that Biden is the kind of person that white people are bad enough to vote for. Like, Biden is bad enough that white people will vote for him, so we'll vote for him because he's better than Trump. Bernie Sanders, they fear that Bernie Sanders will lose the election. And that's simple as that. That's the feel. That's why they weren't voting for Obama at first. They were picking Clinton over Obama until Obama proved he could win some states, and then they started going to Obama. Black voters in the South were solidly behind Hillary Clinton during the pre-voting part of the primaries. Obama's base was like young people, like before he started to really build like a mass movement campaign. Young people liked Barack Obama, right? Like, but like older black voters, yeah, they didn't like Obama at first. They didn't trust him. They didn't trust him at all. But he won their trust. one argument I read in the somebody shared a piece with me today. It was by Jason Johnson, or he was quoted in it. Now, this is the guy that said awful things about Brianna Joy Gray, and Nina Turner. I'm not excusing this man at all, but what he said was actually very interesting when he said that black voters do not vote for people like Bernie Sanders because for Bernie to win, it means that white people would have to vote for something that weakens their privilege. Whether you agree with that or not, there's a feeling that when you want to actually implement social programs and do so on a basis that actually benefits all people, it requires white America to actually give up part of their racial power. Because when you fight for economic and social equality, that means racial equality. At least in a post-Jim Crow era, right? And so there's a feeling that white people will not vote, or not enough will vote for a candidate like Bernie because they know that Bernie will actually make things too good, too fast, and they'll reject it. It's very paradoxical, but that's some of the arguments I've heard. Like Deborah says, Warren is a Republican and a neoliberal. Lots of former Republicans are now Democrats. Warren's not a Republican. Warren was a Republican. There's a thing here. It's like Republican is obviously like the party. Like, do you have like a membership card to a party? Are you registered in a party? But in a modern context, like, are you a Republican? Like, we have to chart what Warren's fundamental beliefs are. And I don't think she fits what a Republican is. Right? I don't think that it fits, right? And so, like, I don't know. Warren's also not what I would call a neoliberal either. Warren's a capitalist to her bones, but Warren reminds me of a kind of pre-neoliberal capitalist because she's willing to tax the rich. She's willing to question, sometimes at least, relics of neoliberalism. She wants to improve standards for workers. She's not quite a neoliberal. She's not a democratic socialist or even a social democrat, but she's not a neoliberal either. That's like it's a small distinction, but it's true. Whereas Buttigieg, Biden, Klobuchar, they are neoliberals. Bernie's a democratic socialist. Warren is a liberal progressive. Buttigieg, Biden, Klobuchar are democratic neoliberals, and Bloomberg is a Republican. Like Bloomberg's a Republican. Like that's the distinction from my perspective. The Nixter says, and thank you for the double super chat. I know I saw the first one there. I wasn't sure if there's going to be a question, but I was going to note it. And thank you for the follow-up where they said, yeah, thanks for helping out Mike. He's a longtime friend and you've gained a sub from me. Well, Nick, thanks so much for that. I really appreciate it. I hope you'll find value in this channel, and I'm glad to see that people have thought I helped out Mike. I'm glad to see that because, you know, Mike and I have similar positions, but we don't necessarily or communicate in the same way, right? So, you know, it's hard sometimes to know if you're doing right by somebody. So I'm glad to see that people like that. Go Habs 89 says, is Biden pro Roe v. Wade? All indications are that yes. I don't think Biden's going to make a move on that. I think Biden, although Biden has said some things about women and their bodily autonomy that are concerning in the past, I don't think Biden is that conservative. Biden's big issue, guys, is on cannabis legalization. He doesn't support it, even though I think that's honestly one of the things you're going to need to do to drive young people. See, the Nixter, I would almost use different terminology. I don't know who you're talking about here. If you're talking about Warren, she's on the left, but she's not a progressive. I would say, if anything, it's the inverse. When I think about it, I think of, like, progressives as, like, there are leftists, and that's, like, democratic socialists, like, and like, you know, and like, real leftists, like, Bernie and leftward are the left. Progressives, like, you can include the left among progressives, but I would say that progressives are not just the left. Progressives include, like, liberals that are more to the left than average liberals, if that makes any sense. You got like right-wingers, you got centrists, you got liberals. And again, I use liberalism from an academic perspective because Republicans are liberals. I don't want to get confusing here, but like small L liberals, Republicans are liberals. Liberalism is a philosophy based on private property and all this and all that. Every president's been a liberal, every single one, even Donald Trump. From Trump to Washington, they've all been liberals. But in the discourse, like Warren is a liberal progressive. She's a progressive. She is not a leftist. Bernie is a progressive and a leftist. Sort of like fingers and thumbs. All thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs. Samantha's making a point, and I think this is look, we don't have evidence yet, but Samantha's basically saying that Obama has hurt Bernie here, and I kind of agree, because Barack Obama doesn't have a visceral hate for Bernie. It seems like as men, they actually get along, but Barack Obama does not want Bernie Sanders to be the nominee, in no way. One, Barack Obama is a neoliberal. He doesn't want a genuine progressive or democratic socialist to run the party. And I think, two, and this was actually brought up even to Warren when she was considering running in 2016. Some people told her that the way Warren was going to run was going to be rejected by Obama because Obama would see it as an attack on his legacy. Because Warren was going to run on the need to take on the big banks, implying that Obama didn't take on the big banks, and he failed, or he didn't try hard enough, or whatever. And so even Warren was seen as a repudiation of the Obama legacy. And so imagine what Bernie would be seen as, right? And in that context, you could see that. But it would be inappropriate and also damaging to his legacy as somebody who's seen as a progressive for Obama to directly go at Bernie Sanders, right? He can't directly say, I don't want Bernie to win. Maybe he would have done it as a last-ditch effort. Let's say last night goes well for Bernie and he's up 200 delegates on Biden. Maybe then Obama's like, look, I got to roll the dice. I got to come out and go at Bernie. There's no choice. But Obama, I think, made the phone calls, guys. That's what I think happened. Obama made the phone calls to Buttigieg and to Klobuchar and to some of the other people that weren't necessarily running for president but are influential Democrats and got them to endorse Biden. I think that's part of this. Obama helped defeat Bernie Sanders. Bernie hasn't lost yet, but he's done his part to hurt Bernie without having to say anything himself in public on the record. And I think that's the way Obama wanted to do it if he had to do anything at all. A bunch of question marks and exclamation marks as a name. I can't read that. I'm sorry. It says, I'm here from the Humanist Report channel. So great to have you here. Glad to have some new folks here. Thank you so much for stopping by. The Nixter says, I will never vote for another Democrat after this election period. Well, I mean, never say, like, would you not vote for AOC or Rashida Tlaib? I would vote for them. Like, I'm Canadian, but I wouldn't just vote for anybody just because necessarily. I'm not necessarily Bernie or bust. Like, I probably would have voted for Hillary Clinton. Probably thrown up in the voting booth. Maybe have to get a new ballot because my ballot would be covered. But I would have done it. That's just me, though. But I didn't shame anybody who voted third party either, to be clear. But like, I wouldn't just necessarily never say what if AOC runs in 8 years. I would definitely vote for her, 100%. Yeah, Joseph says, yeah, that's interesting. I haven't really looked into this for multiple sources, but Joseph brings this up here, where apparently Bernie didn't try to get Clyburn's endorsement. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if Clyburn is just trying to say that because he wants to make it look like Bernie Sanders failed to reach out to the black community. Like, if we're being real, Clyburn was never going to endorse Bernie. Ever. Like, ever, ever, ever was he going to endorse Bernie. So I think it's a bit disingenuous for Clyburn to be like, well, he never sought my endorsement. And I don't even know if it's true. I don't know. Yeah, Rock Lee says a poll said 47% of voters said that endorsement affected their opinion. The Clyburn endorsement of Joe Biden. Now, when they said affected, that can be a bit of a weaselly word because it's like, how much? Did it flip you all the way from a Bernie voter to a Biden voter? Or did it flip you from an undecided to Biden? Or were you going to maybe vote for Biden, but you weren't sure, and then Clyburn locked you right in? So we don't know exactly what it meant in that sense. So like in the last federal election in Canada, they had a poll that said that 43% of Liberal voters in Canada considered strategic voting when they voted. But that doesn't mean that all 43% of those voters were 100% motivated by strategy, which is to say, not all of those 43% of voters would have voted for the NDP or Greens or whatever if strategy wasn't a concern. Some of them would probably have voted Liberal, but were locked in by strategy. Some of them might have voted Liberal, but were locked in. Some of them were maybe wanted to support another party, but were locked in. So the Clyburn effect was massive, but we're not exactly sure how massive. But what is clear is that Biden likely wins without it, but does not get the size of win he needs maybe to change the narrative without it. So Koru just joined the channel. Koru, thank you so much for the support. I very much appreciate it. Your viewing, but also just becoming a member. It helps the channel grow and stabilize over the long term. So thank you. A lot of people saying Biden can't beat Trump. Look, I'm not making any definitive statements. Like, to say that Biden can't beat Trump, I mean, I don't think we can say that. I think that Biden is a weak candidate and a bad matchup for Trump. But, I can't say 100%. But I think if you want to beat Trump, the best choice is Bernie Sanders. That's my view. That Bernie's the best choice to defeat Donald Trump. He's the best candidate, and he's a good matchup versus Trump. Because it's sort of like sports. There are different candidates with different strengths. Like, if I'm being purely objective, going back to 2016, Clinton might have been a very good matchup against a moderate Republican, an establishment Republican, because the establishment Republican can't go after Hillary Clinton for being a corporate neoliberal shill, because they are too. And Clinton would carry a lot more of the progressive voters would have stayed with her. It's different. Whereas Bernie might have been perfectly tailored to face a Donald Trump. The only one that can neutralize him. Whereas running against a moderate Republican might have been harder for Bernie because moderate voters would have been more likely to go Republican. I don't know. The point is that Biden is a really, really good, Trump is a bad matchup for Joe Biden because of the way Trump does politics and what Biden represents in people's minds. Like Rock Lee says, Bernie still did damn good in Texas. I mean, Texas is weird, right? Because we got some polls from Texas that put Bernie in really good positions, guys. The kind of positions that end this contest good. But then we got some other polls that were a lot closer. And if you looked at 538, and I know 538 isn't always right, but they're not always wrong either. And they actually did nail kind of Texas in some ways, where they basically put it They basically put it at a, how do I put it? They basically gave Biden like a 5-point advantage, and Biden ended up winning by, if I look at my map here, he ended up winning Texas by about 4.5. So that kind of works out, right? That like he won by 4.5, 5 points. So, Texas was close, but I think some of the polls indicated that Bernie could have gotten a blowout if the timing was different. Nature Shy says, is the next debate soon enough to pivot it in favor of Bernie? See, that's interesting. I'm not sure. The schedule as it goes right now is that next week, if I look up the primary schedule, just to get this right, I've made this before, but I'm getting a little tired, so I want to make sure I get this right. So right now, we are looking at okay, so basically the way it's going is March 10th, we got Idaho, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, and Washington. And then we have where is it? Then we have the debates, and I believe the next debate, Democratic debate, debate schedule 2020, is the next debate is on March 15th. So basically the way it's going to go is that if I pull it up here, you're getting those primaries, and then a few days later you're getting that debate. And so I don't know if the debate is early enough. If Bernie does decently enough, and again, as we've noted earlier on the stream, if he can win Michigan, if he has a good night, if he minimizes his defeats and maximizes his victories, doesn't get blown out of the water in Missouri and Mississippi, then he's got a shot. And if he wins Washington and Michigan by a good amount, he's got a shot. If he has a bad night that night, it might be hard for him to get back into the race from the delegate math. And so, if he has a good night, survives to the debate a few days later, and can knock Biden out or let Biden knock himself out, then he can get back in it. Dafrax98 says, Yo, Christo, check out Hillary's podcast. It's centrist AF. I will not be checking out Hillary's podcast. I'm sorry, guys. I won't be. Ben Riley says, and thanks for the super chat, Ben, Tulsi is our only hope to crush Warren at this point. I mean, I don't know what role Tulsi's playing in this primary, guys. She hasn't been on a debate stage, and whether you think that's fair or not, but she hasn't been on a debate stage since December or November. And she's basically pulled herself out of the debates. If you remember, she wouldn't have qualified anyway. But you guys remember when there was that debate and Tulsi said that even if I do get a qualifying poll, I'm not going to be a part of it. I would rather spend my time meeting regular voters. And whether you believe Tulsi or whether you think it's a sort of you can't fire me, I quit moment, she basically withdrew from the main contest. And so Tulsi could attack Warren, but I don't think that's necessarily going to be helpful. I think right now, the goal should be to put pressure and positive pressure, implore Warren supporters to move to Bernie. And I think behind the scenes, there's discussions happening to try to get Warren on side with Bernie, and those have to happen. Tulsi, I don't think would be productive in such conversations. Justin Frederick says, so guys, I'm going to probably wrap up in a few minutes. I know it's not we usually sometimes go to about 11, but I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit, if you guys notice, and I don't want to lose it at a point where excuse me, where I can't make videos, right? So I want to rest it when I can. So just a couple questions here. Justin Frederick says, thoughts on the Young Turks coverage in general, Cenk, Anna, etc. I mean, they're pretty good. I mean, I've had criticisms of how they've handled their union situation. A lot of their viewers and their fans and a lot of people on the network suggested that it was motivated to hurt Cenk, when ultimately, as we look at with the results, Cenk was in no way competitive in that district anyway. Like, I'm not trying to attack him. He just wasn't, right? He wasn't competitive. So none of that mattered. His workers want to form a union because his workers want better conditions and a say in how their workplace is run. And it was very disappointing to see Cenk take anti-union positions, right? The Bernie Sanders' vision for labor relations would make doing what Cenk is doing illegal. And so Cenk should just do what Bernie Sanders is proposing, I think. But yeah, their coverage is good. It's not my favorite. I like the Majority Report better than the Young Turks. I like David Dole a lot. I like Mike Figueroa. I like those guys more than the Young Turks. But I watch the Young Turks every now and then. I think they're entertaining. They got like a big group of people. They got like a large cast. I know it's not a cast, but you know what I mean. They have like a roster of different people, so it's interesting. But they're not a source I watch every day. Like, they're on my subscriptions feed, but I don't watch them every day, if that makes sense. Somebody's saying, oh no, it's the corona. I do not have coronavirus, guys. I'm okay. Somebody that, do I have stuttering issues? I don't. I don't have stuttering issues. I don't know. I don't think I've never been a stutterer. But I'm not like a formally trained speaker, although I've done a lot of media work. I mean, I've been a lecturer at a university, so I speak in front of crowds frequently, like big rooms of 100 kids, 200 kids. I've been on the radio and TV and things like that a lot. But it's not really that I stutter. I do have some like speech things. Like, one thing is like I gulp, because like I'll speak really fast and then have to like gulp away my speech. So you'll notice that sometimes in my videos, and I edit it out sometimes, but not always, because it gets intertwined sometimes. So I don't have any stuttering issues, but I think everyone has these speech quirks, right? I have them too. I mean, like, look, a lot, like Nature Shy says that there's you have a lot of nostalgia for TYT. TYT's great. And you're right. Like, there was a time where they were the only left-wing game in town, on the internet and off the internet. It's just, they're not my ideal source, right? That's what I'm saying. And like, somebody says, my cadence is very Canadian. Nothing really else has jumped out. I don't know if I have a Canadian. I don't know. There are regional accents in Canada that are very distinct, like the Newfoundland accent. But like, the idea of a Canadian accent to me is so weird, because like I know there's like the stereotype where it's like a and a boot and things like that, but I don't hear that, guys. I don't think I hear that. Daffer says Christo has a corona because he's a king. Well, I don't know if I would ever aspire to royalty, but I appreciate the compliment. Yeah, sometimes the chats in some communities can be vile. I think our chat's really good. I think our chat's really good. I mean, people get heated because we're fighting for a better world. But, I think our chat is respectful to people in the chat. but also to the topics we discuss. So, guys, like, I am going to wrap. I know I didn't get to every question. As the streams get bigger, it's harder and harder for me to do that. But it's something that I still try to do. But I thank everyone for supporting the channel tonight with super chats and just with being here. Some people noted, like, they say, like, sorry because I can't donate. Look, you support the channel by watching, right? There are ads on videos. You support the channel. When you watch my stuff, when you click on a video and you watch it all the way through, YouTube shows that to other people, which helps the channel grow. So the best thing you can do to support the channel day to day is when I post a new video, watch it. If you're a new subscriber, click the little bell if you haven't clicked the little bell, because what that does is when I post a video, it gives you a notification right away, which allows you to see the content as soon as it goes up, and it helps the channel grow. So I want to thank you all for supporting me and for all the new people today, because I don't know how many people are new in this stream, but the channel's been growing by quite a bit. So there's some new folks here, and I want to welcome you. For those who don't know, I do these every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock to roughly 10:30, 11. And I do additional streams on some nights, after a debate or some kind of live event. I don't make a schedule far in advance, but I'll often let you know earlier in the day if I'm planning to do a stream. So, guys, I want to thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow with some new videos. And again, thank you for all the new people to the channel. Have a good one.